So remember all of Elon Musk's promises that we're gonna live on Mars, we're gonna settle Mars, we're gonna go there, we're gonna live there, build cities on Mars. Yeah, that's all been canceled now. Elon has realized that the moon is closer than Mars, and so now he's announced that we're gonna build cities on the moon. We're gonna live on the moon first, and he put out a tweet or a post on X. Quote, "For those unaware, SpaceX has already shifted focus to building a self-growing city on the moon, as we can potentially achieve that in less than 10 years, where Mars would take 20 plus years." He says it's only possible to travel to Mars when the planets align every 26 months, etc., whereas we can launch to the moon every 10 days with only a 2-day trip time. This means we can iterate much faster to complete a moon city than a Mars city. Of course, the moon has been in the same orbit for the entire lifetime of Elon Musk and all of his people, and it makes you wonder, why did they just now realize that it's closer than Mars? Of course, what he's doing is a cover story. I'll explain more. It's all theater, okay? Even Elon himself is part of the theater. He was selected to play a role to try to convince everybody that we have to go to Mars, etc. We'll talk about that. He says SpaceX will also strive to build a Mars city and begin doing so in about 5 to 7 years. But the overriding priority is securing the future of civilization. And the moon is faster, he says. So, of course, there are so many issues with this. Elon is known for making big pie-in-the-sky promises that just don't pan out. For example, for how many years did he promise that full self-driving vehicles would be just, 2 or 3 years away? And then it wasn't. And that was like 12 years ago. And granted, full self-driving vehicles, that technology is difficult. And granted, Tesla does seem to be ahead of certainly any other American car maker. So they are making great advancements in that area. However, Elon is famous for overstating his technology. For example, the Grok AI engine is not even as good as the AI engine that I built for less than $2 million, or, well, a little more than $2 million, in terms of answering real-world questions. For example, Grok still lies about vaccines. It says vaccines are safe and effective. And, Grok still pushes transgenderism and things like that. So out of all the billions that his companies have, Elon still couldn't generate an AI model that knows the difference between a man and a woman. Think about that. That's pretty wild. NASA wanted to launch the first lesbians into space. I think those plans have been canceled, but maybe SpaceX will launch the first trans on the moon. And they'll have like a gender-neutral restroom. On the moon shack, it'll be an outhouse where, you walk to the outhouse on the moon, you unzip your spacesuit and pull your pants down, and the vacuum of space evacuates your colon automatically right there. It'd be a giant sucking sound. Everything is lost in space. So there are problems with this idea of having, building cities on the moon. And Elon put out this silly tweet with a video showing like families and little kids playing on the moon, wearing little space helmets, and a Cybertruck vehicle driving around on the moon, and people living in little moon domes and everything, and growing plants and everything. And it's like, my God, are people really that stupid? And then I realize, yeah, they watch the Super Bowl halftime show. They really are that stupid, But people believe in the comic book version of science that Elon loves to push because, again, it's all theatrics. He's basically playing a role. And you got to wonder why is there this big cover story about, we have to go to the moon now, not Mars. We're going to the moon. So I thought I would step back for a moment and just explain the actual science of why we can't build human cities on the moon. I mean, not with current technology, for one thing. And even if you could, people wouldn't live very long because, of course, point number one is that the moon does not have Earth's ionosphere or magnetosphere that deflects the ionizing radiation away from the surface of the Earth, the radiation coming from the sun. And when you're on the moon, you don't have that protection, which means that ionizing, cancer-causing sun rays, let's just say, are penetrating your body and mutating your chromosomes, your genes, and you're going to die of cancer in no time. So if you live on the moon, you'll die on the moon because you won't live there very long. So I'm not sure how Elon thinks we're going to reproduce on the moon, because if you're anywhere on the surface of the moon, your genetics are all jacked up, and you're going to, if you can even get pregnant, you're going to give birth to mutants. For real. That's the actual biology at work. So the only way to live on the moon is to actually live under the surface of the moon. You would have to live in moon caves. Literally, that's the only way. And even the moon caves don't offer perfect shielding. And of course, then you're missing out on all the light that humans need. Everybody would be vitamin D deficient. And if you ever venture outside, then you're getting the cancer-causing radiation, even in a spacesuit, obviously. But in order to make the moon caves, you would have to launch and land, cave-making equipment, boring machines and giant excavators and all kinds of equipment that could somehow run on the moon. Most of that equipment on Earth runs on diesel engines. And diesel engines, not all of it does, but most of it does. Diesel engines, of course, require oxygen in the atmosphere in order for the engine to combust, obviously. How much oxygen is there in the air on the moon? That's a trick question because, of course, there is no air on the moon, which means there's also no oxygen in the air because there's no air. So, the first idiot that lands an excavator on the moon and then climbs up into that with their little spacesuit and turns the key, like, why isn't this starting? We brought diesel fuel and it's not even running. Yeah, because there's no air. Okay, so how are you gonna dig caves? How are you gonna make tunnels on the moon unless you have giant machines with massive energy sources? Oh, don't tell me. You're gonna have solar panels on the moon? Yeah, okay, fine. Solar does work on the moon, but not enough to bore through rock. And, if you look all over the planet here, you're not going to find a solar-powered tunnel-making boring machine on Earth because they don't exist. No such thing. So even after you transport all that equipment to the moon, you can't power it. So again, how are you going to make the caves? You're not. If you come out of the caves, you die. And even in the caves, guess what? There's no atmosphere. So this is the other problem. Well, there are multiple problems. You've got no atmosphere. That is, no atmospheric pressure. So if you take off your spacesuit, your face explodes. Your skin explodes. Everything sublimates into vapor. You turn into a crystalline display of, frozen, freeze-dried molecular matter, basically. Look, it's a freeze-dried astronaut. Yeah. I'm sure they could serve that up as beef jerky on Epstein Island or something, but on the moon is not that useful. And of course, all it takes is one little pinhole in your spacesuit, and then all your air evacuates and you suffocate and die, and then you get freeze-dried also as the pressure inside your spacesuit goes to zero. So when Elon tells us, we're going to go to the moon, and, we haven't been there since the 70s or something. Like, yeah, we've never been there, bro. Not anybody from this civilization. Maybe there's some, breakaway civilization that's been there. Maybe they have cities on the moon using some exotic technology, but we don't. Not anything that comes out of NASA, that's for sure. And if you believe that the Apollo missions were real and they sent people to the moon, then you would have to believe they left one guy behind, because there's obviously some guy filmed the launch of the Lunar module from the surface of the moon. Filmed it, panned up with it as it was launching, and filmed that, and then I guess beamed that back to Earth so that we could watch the launch of the lunar module. Except, why did they leave that guy behind? Yeah, right? Why'd they leave that guy behind? Because it's not just an automated camera, obviously, because it pans up very rapidly with the launch. And the launch doesn't even look real. It looks like a bunch of sparks. Doesn't even look like a rocket engine. But whatever, I mean, it was easy to trick people back in the 60s and 70s when TV was like a 12-inch screen. Everyone's like, what is that, Not so easy to trick people today. Everybody's looking more closely. And if you look at the old footage from the Apollo missions, it's a laughable joke. Anyway, so beyond that, let's assume that, yeah, the Apollo missions were great. They walked around on the moon and they were fine. And they didn't need to inflate their spacesuits because of some magic. Okay, whatever. And they didn't need radiation shields because, of course, the spaceship didn't have any shielding because that would have been way too heavy. You can't really launch a bunch of lead plates into space. Not economical, it turns out. So they were protected by, I don't know, like a couple of micron thick layer of gold foil and aluminum foil or something. It was basically like, it's like riding in an aluminum foil basket through space is what that was like on the Apollo missions. I do think they went into Earth orbit, by the way. They just stayed in orbit for a while within the magnetosphere. So that's why they didn't die from cancer, because they were always protected by Earth's magnetosphere. They stayed within the bubble, you see. They just orbited around for a few days and then pretended like they were talking on the moon. And then they came back, splashed down. Oh, it's all theater. I mean, look, if you don't realize that everything you've been taught about history is total theater, you're not paying attention to, Charlie Kirk assassination, TPUSA, Super Bowl halftime garbage, COVID, 9/11. If you think that the global elite aren't faking everything to run psyops on your brain, then, you need to get even more red-pilled is all I'm saying. You're not red-pilled enough. And, NASA cannot reproduce any telemetry from the Apollo missions. Did you know that? They claim that they overwrote the tapes. So, yeah, the most historic mission in the history of humankind, supposedly, all the telemetry data and information that would have documented the acceleration, the relative velocity, the angular momentum and everything of how they got to the moon, all that's gone. Yeah, gone. Kind of like the way they super fast cleaned up the Charlie Kirk assassination site, or they bulldozed away all the rubble of 9/11 and the Twin Towers. Well, that disappeared quickly, didn't it? Can't let anybody examine any evidence now. So, yeah, there's no telemetry. It's all made up. But the elite needs somebody like Elon Musk to keep sort of weaving the fairy tales, obviously. Just want to get people to believe in these comic book realities. And they're relying on the fact that the masses of people today, especially in America, are scientifically illiterate. They're also mathematically illiterate, and they're historically illiterate. I mean, basically, they're just dumb as shit, right? So they'll believe anything. So, I mean, for the most part, right? You know what I'm talking about. You see these people, you interact with them, they're dumber than moon dust. So the other part of this that's really important is the impacts from the so-called micrometeoroids. These meteoroids, these little small ones that can be the size of like grains of sand. They could be, a millimeter or smaller. They can be moving through space at extremely high relative velocity. Relative to what? Relative to the surface of the moon. And so if you're standing there out in the open, and then, I don't know, there's just a little storm of these little particles moving through space at, whatever relative speed. It could be anything. It could be, 50 kilometers a second, which is, faster than hypersonic missiles, by the way, that you hear about on Earth. 50 kilometers a second is moving. And that can just punch holes through like your face, your suit, your visor, your equipment, the batteries for your Land Rover or whatever you have, and your dome, your dome home. So your dome home, it's going to be a holy site, and I don't mean Jesus. It's going to be full of holes in no time, because have you looked at the surface of the moon? Have you seen it? Have you seen it? You can look up and you can see it. Guess what's all over the surface of the moon? Oh, yeah, explosion marks, or maybe not explosion, but craters from impacts. And you can see some of them from Earth. They're so large. It's like, whoa, that was a big one. There goes the dome. There goes the tunnel. There goes the cave, right? The moon it's in a giant space shooting gallery. And if you don't believe me, just get some night vision optics and spend an hour looking up at the sky on a dark night on Earth. You know what you're going to see? You're going to see tons of so-called shooting stars, which is just particles burning up in the atmosphere. Lots of them, like every minute. And that's not even during a meteor shower. That's just during a normal night. There's all kinds of stuff that's getting burned up in the atmosphere. Well, we've already established that the moon has no atmosphere. So that stuff doesn't get burned up. It goes all the way to the surface. It just hits the surface, including it hits anybody standing on the surface, i.e., all the people that Elon Musk says are going to be living there. And by the way, how large of a hole through your suit and through your body does it take to ruin your life on the moon? Doesn't take much. I would say just let's say a 2.5 millimeter hole all the way through your torso. It can go through your lungs, your spine, your heart, your arteries, plus your spacesuit. So you're losing pressure and oxygen, and you're dead. You're dead. I mean, it's like getting hit with a sniper round, except this bullet flies at like Mach 100. So it's the fastest moving sniper round ever, more powerful than any firearm on planet Earth by far. I mean, think about it. Sniper rounds on Earth, they might travel at what? Like 3,200 feet per second or something like that. And I'm sorry to use the imperial system, but that's the way I learned long-range shooting, feet per second. Whereas we're talking in outer space, these objects can have relative velocities, like I said, like 50 kilometers a second. Oh, that's a big deal. That's a big difference. So you could be walking around on the moon, like talking to your moon neighbors, like, hey, Mary and Joseph, how's it going here today? And they're standing right in front of you like, it's going great. And your head's gone. Oh, what happened to Joe's head? Oh, it vented into moon space. Oh. Well, Mary, sorry to hear about that, but looks like Joe's gone. Joe's gone, and we might want to maybe get back underground into the caves, because this is a dangerous place to be here on the surface of the moon. Yeah, that can happen just like that. And then, by the way, what is Mary going to eat on the moon? Because you know that the moon dust is not soil. Okay, just want to be clear. That's not soil. It's not dirt. There's no organic matter at all. There's no microbial life in moon soil. There's no such thing as moon soil. And it's basically totally toxic. It's got all kinds of toxic compounds and like sharp little nano dust pieces that probably cut you and cut your suits open and things like that. I mean, it's horrible. So, you can't just, hey, we're going to grow tomatoes on the moon. It's got plenty of sunlight. Yeah, the problem is that it when the sun's not shining, it's almost absolute zero. That's a problem. And then when the sun is shining, it's boiling you to death with so much heat that no one can stand it. So the temperature extremes are totally out of control. But again, there's no soil on the moon. So how are you going to grow anything? Well, you're going to have to grow, hydroponically, I suppose. You're going to have some kind of grow system. So the growth system needs, well, it needs sunlight, photosynthesis, you need water, you need warmth, and you need air pressure, and you need nutrients. Yeah. Are any of those things on the moon other than sunlight? Not real. I mean, there might be some buried ice that they can find somewhere else. They have to mine it. How are you going to mine the ice when your excavator doesn't work because the diesel engine doesn't run, as we already talked about? So what are you going to do? Go out there with a ice pick? I'm gathering today's ice. The problem is the minute you dig up some ice and put it in a bucket, what happens to it? It sublimates into vapor because physics, right? So, hey, that's a nice ice cube there, Joe. And it's gone. It's totally gone. What happened? Oh, you just released freeze-dried, ice crystals or what, water vapor into moon orbit. Now, that'll be back to haunt us next year at a relative velocity that'll probably kill somebody. So, good luck with that. How are you going to get the water? How are you going to get the soil? How are you going to grow any food? Seriously, how are you going to grow food? So, we'll bring it from Earth. Oh man, you thought food was expensive in Hawaii because you have to ship it from the mainland. Oh, wait till you have to get it shipped to the moon. Man, you thought bananas were expensive. Oh man. One banana, $1 million. I'm sure there's a lot of money laundering opportunities with NASA on that. But I don't know, maybe they can read the Epstein files and they can eat each other because cannibalism seems to be a big part of the global elite pedo cult these days. So maybe they'll eat each other on the moon. Especially the ones that get their heads cut off with the meteor impacts and so on. But suppose you find a way to grow food and have water, and you figure out also how to deal with all your waste because you're going to urinate and defecate sooner or later, even though you're wearing a spacesuit. Sooner or later, you're just going to have to go, suit or no suit, whatever it takes. So you're going to have to deal with all that stuff. And I know what you're saying. Oh, we're going to recycle the urine. We're going to drink our pee, and we're going to grow potatoes in the poo. Okay, yeah, that was a movie with Matt Damon in it on Mars where they had some atmosphere that was based on a book, and that is potentially feasible if you have some atmosphere. Mars has some atmosphere. The moon does not. Mars doesn't have much. It's only actually 0.6% of the atmospheric pressure of Earth on average at sea level, in case you're curious. But that's according to NASA. So who knows if that's even real. But suppose you solve all these problems. Then you have a problem of the lack of gravity causing your bones to turn to mush. Now, of course, I hope you know this, but your bones are piezoelectric devices. And when bones are stressed, they build bone density. It's a brilliant system, actually, because if you exercise or, if you're into martial arts or whatever, and you're using your bones and you have impacts, this is why micro-impact therapy is very, very good for your bones and your joints and all your connective tissue, because the more stress you have, the stronger your body gets. It builds more bone density. It becomes stronger due to stress. In order to do that, of course, you have to have minerals in your diet and you have to have vitamin D. Most people are vitamin D deficient, but imagine how vitamin D deficient you'll be living in a cave on the moon, and the only time you get to go outside, you're in a spacesuit. So you're getting no vitamin D from the sun, obviously, and you're living in a cave, and you're eating, lettuce grown in your neighbor's poo, and you're drinking urine all day long. So, and then your bones are falling apart and turning to mush because you have no gravity. So before long, your skull becomes really round, like John McCain's head. And then you start to just turn to mush where you can't pick up tools properly. You start breaking your wrist bones and your legs start breaking, your pelvis you try to sit down on the moon toilet, to alleviate yourself, and you push, and then something breaks. It broke a pelvis there. Oh man, on the moon, constipated with a broken pelvis. Who are you gonna call? 911? No, you're dead. You're toast. So that's not going to work very well, and you're not going to be able to really work with much of the machinery that's on the moon, even if they figure out how to power that machinery, because all your bones are too weak. You'll break everything. You break your ribs. Maybe just breathing. You just take a deep breath. Crack. Oh my God, what happened? And then your spine turns to mush, and you're going to have all kinds of horrible health problems as a result of lack of gravity, obviously. So if you try to live on the moon with only 1/6 roughly of the Earth's gravity, you're going to have health problems galore. You're going to have heart problems. You're going to have circulation problems. You're going to have mental problems. You're going to have digestion problems. It's going to be horrible. And then, some people say, well, no problem. We're just going to build these like metal domes. They're going to be really strong with metal. And then we'll pressurize them on the inside. So we'll have pressure. We can take off our spacesuits, and we can exercise, and we can keep our bones strong. We can take vitamin D. We can do all this stuff. Okay, great. So how much pressure do you think you need inside the dome? Because it turns out in order to pressurize it, you're going to need what's equivalent to about 10 tons of force that's pushing out of the dome for every square meter. 10 tons. 10 tons of force. Because that's, air pressure on Earth is strong. That's what it is. So your dome wants to explode, okay? Your dome wants to explode the minute you put air in it at that pressure. And you're thinking, no problem, we built a metal dome, it's strong. Okay, great. Except there's another problem. And again, this comes down to physics. But you know what happens to most metals when you heat them? They expand. Yeah, they expand. You know what happens to metals when you freeze them? Oh, they contract. Wow. Have you ever looked on a bridge? You see like a just an overpass or a bridge. They don't just have one giant piece of concrete across the bridge. They have gaps in it. They actually have gaps. And the gaps are called, I think they're called expansion gaps or expansion something. And that's designed so that as the bridge expands and contracts based on weather on Earth or temperatures, that the bridge doesn't buckle and crack and collapse. And ask anybody who's a civil engineer, anybody. Do you pour one giant slab for a whole bridge? They laugh at you. Of course you don't. That bridge is going to expand. Everything has got metal in it, even concrete. But the rebar, all of it, everything that's got metal in it, especially, is going to expand and contract and expand and contract. Now, imagine how much that happens on the moon. So there's something called thermal cycling. Thermal cycling between day and night. When the sun's shining on you, you're like 120 degrees Celsius. When the sun is not shining on you, you're like minus 120 degrees Celsius or colder, even colder. Those are just rough estimates. So your temperatures are swinging from insanely hot to insanely cold. What do you think happens to your metal dome? It contracts, it expands. It contracts, it expands. Every day, it contracts, expands. Oh yeah, that sucker starts to crack and stress and buckle, and then it explodes. And there goes all your air and all your poo and all your plants and all your kids too. All the kids you had with you in your family dome on the moon, they get blown out into outer space. Right next to your poo potatoes. Oh my God, my dome blew up. Yeah, because we don't have the material to build domes that can actually withstand thermal cycling. It doesn't exist. And by the way, if some child were to grow up on the moon, they would be so deformed and so deficient, you'd almost have to diagnose them with scurvy because of the lack of gravity, they would never be able to go to Earth. They would die on Earth if they were even able to live on the moon. So you can't really have families on the moon that can ever return to Earth and, repopulate Earth in an emergency. This is something that Elon Musk seems to be implying. Oh, we need to have redundancy for the species, so we got to have, human colonies on the moon in case something happens to Earth. Yeah, good luck. You're never coming back to Earth, man. You're going to die on the moon. You and all your family are going to die on the moon. And even if they don't die, they can never live on Earth, so they would die on Earth. Can you imagine re-entry? Take like a moon child that grew up on the moon and then became a teenager, and then you stick them on a rocket to go to Earth, and then they have to go through re-entry and splash down, and they're pulling like 8 Gs. Man, you're gonna open up the splashdown capsule. It's gonna be like it's gonna look like roadkill in there, man. It's like, oh dang, that was Bobby. Sorry, Bobby can't handle the gravity on Earth. It turns out that's a hard way to learn that lesson. And then, anyway, supposing that you can survive all this, one day there's a solar flare, and since you don't have a magnetosphere nor an ionosphere, the solar flare just fries all your equipment on the moon. It's like a giant EMP attack. It's like, oh, there goes everything that's electronic. Oh, dang, well, there goes the water recovery pumps and the solar panels and the batteries and the communication systems and pretty much everything. We might as well just open up the dome at this point. It's like whoever goes to the moon is on a suicide mission. I mean, if you're planning on living there, it's actually suicide to even make the trip. You'll never be the same again, just from the cancer of the radiation. So, all right. So the answer, you're wondering, so why? Why is Elon pushing this? It's obvious, isn't it? It's obvious. This is a cover story for putting military weapons on the moon. Now, I've talked about this before. If you understand anything about gravity, you know that Earth is at the bottom of a large gravity well, and that the moon is the high ground outside that gravity well, obviously. And of course, the moon and the Earth are both caught in the gravity well of the sun, which is the largest mass in our solar system, obviously. But anyway, if you focus on Earth and the moon, Earth is at the bottom of a gravity well. So the moon is the high ground, and whoever controls the moon really has a kinetic domination over Earth, because from the moon, you can launch rockets. Now, yeah, you can actually take a bunch of rockets to the moon and you can set them up on the moon, and you don't have to live there. You could remotely detonate those rockets, and that would be the high ground. There could be all kinds of different kinetic weapons that could be launched from the moon, and they would have tremendous relative velocity by the time they hit Earth. And, through directional control, things like hyperglide vehicle technology, they could be used to hit any target anywhere on Earth. And you might say, well, why? Why do you want to launch targets or missiles from the moon? Why not just launch them from Earth? Well, because, of course, all of the satellites of the other nations, China in particular, are looking for launch signatures of our own ICBMs or other missiles. It's the launch signatures because of all that energy that's expended to boost them into low Earth orbit, let's say, a ballistic trajectory. So it's very easy to spot those. But if there's something coming from the moon, it's almost impossible to spot. So weapons that are launched on the moon, or from the moon, that come in to strike a target on Earth are essentially undetectable. They are, in effect, stealth ICBMs, but it's more like interplanetary ballistic missile instead of intercontinental. So it's IPBMs, right? IPBMs. So that's why. So Elon, the whole point of Elon, who is essentially playing a role, just to reiterate, he has to sell this silly cartoon comic book moon mission, like we're going to live on the moon, to the dumbed down population, so they will get behind and support all these launches of weapon systems to militarize the moon so that the U.S. can try to claim the moon as its own and then achieve domination over not just China and Russia and the countries on Earth, but also domination over orbital platforms. See? Because everything that's in Earth orbit is also below the moon in terms of the moon being the high ground, because the moon is farther away from Earth than all the satellites that are in Earth's orbit, obviously. So the moon can be a launch site to take out satellites or to hit ground targets or targets at sea, etc. That's all this is about. In fact, the original Apollo missions were also just a cover story for the weaponization of space. And it was all framed as, oh, I forgot the speech by JFK. Something about we're going to do what no one has ever done before. We're going to do it because it's they said it's not possible. But again, I'm sorry, I'm butchering the speech. I don't remember the speech. I wasn't even alive. But they said we're going to go to the moon because we can. No, we're going to go to the moon is what he was really saying is because we need a cover story for the militarization of outer space, so we can build weapons and satellites and surveillance systems and, orbital nukes and all kinds of things like that. That was always the whole thing. That's why they faked the Apollo missions, because it was never about landing on the moon. That's nonsense. They didn't need to put people on the moon. Could they have landed equipment on the moon? Yeah, sure. I'm just saying there haven't been humans on the moon. There could be, crashed rovers or something. NASA's good at crashing things into even Mars. And they did that a few years ago too, because they failed to translate meters into feet, I think it was, or they failed meters or feet to meters, and then one of their satellites crashed right into the red planet. At least that's what they told us. But remember, NASA is the same group that tells us they have helicopters flying around on Mars right now. That's what they claim, helicopters on Mars. And they brag about it, and they talk about it, and they post videos. They say, look, our helicopters flying around Mars. Yeah. A planet that you say has virtually no atmosphere. So that's, NASA, you know what it stands for, right? Never a straight answer. That's what it means. And of course, that NASA was originally founded off of Operation Paperclip, which was the secret program, now declassified, that brought in Nazi rocket engineers from the Hitler regime. So NASA has been and continues to be run by Nazis. And that's just history. That's just straight up history. That's not even a conspiracy. That's just Operation Paperclip. It's well documented. It's declassified. Everybody knows this. So if you want to know who's running NASA, it's the Nazis to this day. And why? Because, well, the Nazis had the best, the V2 rocket technology. They had the best rockets. Wasn't it Goddard, I think, was one of the early scientists? The Nazis had the best rockets. And so, brought them into the U.S. and gave them new names and new identities and everything, and plugged them into NASA, what became NASA, plugged them into the pharmaceutical industry, to produce poisons, to poison the population, obviously, and finance also. And to this day, they persist. I mean, half the leaders of the FDA are from this lineage, by the way. Just look them up, seriously. I mean, okay, I'll just read some of the names that have been commissioners of the FDA. Schmidt. Here's a guy, Andrew von Eichenbach, Margaret Hamburg, Scott Gottlieb, David Kessler. Come on. Wasn't there also a Gerberding that was in there at one point? I'm not saying that those people in particular are themselves Nazis or anything. I'm just saying that the lineage of German heritage that came out of Operation Paperclip continues in lots and lots of, regulatory agencies and tech companies and industry and weapons and military, etc. It's all there. And it all traces back, or much of it traces back, to Operation Paperclip. And just watch, when they start launching all kinds of things to the moon, they're going to be telling you, oh, we're lifting the infrastructure the humans will need to live there. So we're going to launch all these rockets, and all these like dumbass humans will be on the ground cheering, yay, this is the future for humanity. We're going to live on the moon as the rockets launch, yay. Not realizing that it's just a giant psyop. You're never going to the moon. You're not going to have human cities on the moon. They just turn it into a giant weapons platform to basically nuke China without using nukes. Need I also point out that the velocity that can be achieved by something just basically falling from the moon, I mean, you'd have to boost it off the moon's surface a little bit. But the velocity that it can achieve by the time it strikes Earth's surface is tremendous, and you don't need any propulsion to achieve that velocity. Do you know that? So let's do this. I'm gonna ask Opus 4.6 to do the math on that. So I'm asking that if there's an object that's boosted off the surface of the moon and it's allowed to free fall on a collision course with Earth, and it's able to freely accelerate through space as it approaches Earth, what's the relative velocity of the impact with Earth's atmosphere when it arrives? And it does the math, and it comes up with the answer. 11 kilometers per second. And of course, if you know anything about physics, you know that that's the same answer whether it's a small object or a large object. Doesn't matter. The mass doesn't matter. It's the same. So 11 kilometers per second, how many Mach is that? People like to talk about Mach. Like a hypersonic missile is considered to be something like Mach 5 or Mach 6, right? Or let's say the intercontinental ballistic missiles can arrive at speeds of like Mach 10 because they're coming out of low Earth orbit. And then Russia's new Oreshnik missile system, I'm going from memory here, but I think that's Mach 15 or more. And those, they look like, lightning rods coming out of the sky and just hammering the ground and just obliterating everything, even without using explosives or nuclear warheads. And that was maybe Mach 15. I forgot the exact number. Well, 11 kilometers per second is Mach 32. Mach 32. So, and remember, energy is 1/2 mass times velocity squared. Don't forget the squared part, because that's where the damage happens. That's where things are turned to dust, is because of the squared of the velocity. So 11 kilometers per second, if you're trying to translate that into the actual energy that's imparted into objects on the ground, you end up squaring that number as part of the calculation. And then you end up with an answer that's like complete obliteration of every target on the ground. So yes, the moon is being weaponized as a weapons launch platform, because if you just gently nudge something off the surface of the moon and you put it on a trajectory course that collides with Earth, it can arrive on Earth without using any rockets or any propulsion whatsoever. It can arrive at Mach 32. That's why Elon has been told to go sell this dumbass story that we're going to build human cities on the moon. Again, you'd have to be a complete idiot to believe that. But then again, people watch the Super Bowl halftime. So that it kind of answers itself right there. So all this so-called heavy lifting of stuff to the moon that you're going to be told is all to build, human cities, nonsense. They're building weapons platforms, and they're just launching weapons onto the moon that are going to be used to sort of Gaza Earth. They're going to turn entire cities into rubble by using moon launches. You see? And if you sit there and cheer that, oh my God, we're going to live on the moon, you're a moron. No, they're going to destroy humans. They're going to kill people. They're going to do to cities what Israel did to Gaza. They're going to commit mass genocide from the moon. Because remember, as you push items up to the moon, it's like winding up a giant cosmic rubber band. You're storing energy in the relative height out of the gravity well. And to release that energy, you just drop it back towards Earth. And then all that energy comes back into the velocity of the object. So think about this. You're using heavy lift rockets to lift objects up to the moon that will later come back to Earth as weapons. So the energy investment into those objects is actually found in the propellant of the rockets that put them onto the moon. So you're sort of pre-investing all of the rocket fuel from Earth to get them up to the moon. Once they're there, they can be launched relatively easily to come back down and strike Earth. And I should probably cover this because somebody might say, well, no, it's going to burn up in the atmosphere. No, it's not. It's not going to burn up in the atmosphere because it's not a rock with an unstable shape, obviously. They're going to be cone-shaped objects. I mean, come on, folks, just look at the Oreshnik. They're cones, okay? And they spin, so they have stability. They can go through the entire atmosphere in like 2 seconds, or whatever the number is. It's a very small number. They can go through the entire atmosphere with stable flight because of the exotic materials that we can now create. Different kinds of alloys. And in fact, we just covered the fact the other day that when the U.S. dropped these bunker buster bombs on Iran last June, one of them did not explode. These are called the so-called bunker busters, the 30,000-pound bombs. Well, there's a very special material that's used on the front, the nose of that bomb, to allow it to penetrate through tens of meters of mountain rock. That alloy is called Eglin. Eglin, I believe, is what that's called. I don't know much about that other than its name, but it's obviously a very durable alloy if it can go through tens of meters of freaking rock. So can it go through air, even at very high speeds? Absolutely it can. What's it going to look like? It's going to look like a lightning rod from God coming down out of the sky. It's going to look like the hammer of Thor or the lightning of Zeus. It's going to be moving so fast, you won't even realize it's moving. It's just going to look like a solid plasma bolt from the heavens. Probably cause a bunch of Christians to open up the book of Revelation. Didn't we see this? Are these the white horses? I thought the white horse is coming out of the sky. No, it's not. It's the plasma excitation of the air molecules because this thing is moving at Mach 32 because it got launched off the moon, okay? And whatever it hits is going to be obliterated as if a giant meteor slammed into that city. That's what this is all about. And I'm shocked that I'm the only person talking about this. Well, maybe I'm not so shocked, but whatever. Like nobody, I don't know what to say, folks. I mean, we don't have very many smart people left on Earth. There's a few, but mostly it's just people following the brainwashing and all the fairy tales. And Elon Musk is a fairy tale weaver. His job is to push the fairy tales. My job is, I'm the spell breaker. My job is to break the spells and tell you what's actually happening. And in order to do that, we have to have some critical thinking. Why do we want to be on the moon? Because strategically, it's the high ground. Obviously, it's just abundantly obvious. With this kind of weapons technology, you can get a nuclear or near nuclear level destruction without using nuclear weapons. So we're talking like 6 times 10 to the 11th joules. So, I mean, that's if you're using a 10-ton object, okay, that's accelerated to that speed and slams into the earth. Now, that's not even as big as Hiroshima, not even close. It's only 1%, roughly, of Hiroshima. But it's all directed directly into the target on the ground. The thing about Hiroshima or Nagasaki or these other nuclear weapons, they say, well, it's like a 15 kiloton weapon, but half of that energy just goes up. So really not even half the energy is directed downward to the intended target. But when you have a kinetic weapon that actually strikes the ground 100% of the energy is imparted into the target. And it's all kinetic energy. It doesn't arrive as heat energy, which is what, nuclear bombs do, or atomic bombs. A lot of that energy goes into heat production. But when it comes to kinetic weapons, it's all kinetic. Now, some of that ends up becoming heat just because of the friction of the atoms and everything, because there's so much kinetic energy being imparted. But you can destroy deep targets. For example, the Fordow nuclear enrichment facility in Iran that the bunker busters did not destroy. You know what would be the ultimate way to destroy something like that? Launch it from the moon. Obviously. So then no country is safe anywhere on Earth if America dominates the moon. So my prediction is the moon is going to be a battleground for control between China and the United States, East versus West. And Russia will probably play a role because they have really outstanding rocket launch technology. And also, Russia and China, they know that America faked the Apollo missions. They all know that. Only the American people don't know that, by the way. It's so hilarious. Like, we went to the moon. Really? Because you saw that. You thought you saw it on a black and white TV in 1971 or 72. No, you saw what they wanted you to see. Total psyop. And the United States is behind China on almost every kind of technology that exists, other than heavy rocket launches. But Russia is ahead of the U.S. on that. But China's got the best robots. And if you're going to set up weapon systems on the moon, you're going to need robotics. You're going to need robots that can handle the wild temperature fluctuations and all the other problems we talked about. But anyway, you're not going to see a bunch of humans on the moon. You're going to see a bunch of weapons on the moon. And those weapons are going to be aimed at us right here on Earth, where no one is safe. And one more thing, these weapons can also cause tsunamis. So they can target them just offshore of a country, and the impact in the ocean will unleash all that energy right into the water, and it'll create a tidal wave that can inundate coastline regions and destroy cities by flooding. So it doesn't even have to hit the city. It could just hit the ocean. And there are many other obvious targets for this, not just deep underground military bases, but also things like nuclear power plants, nuclear enrichment facilities. It could be anything. It could be, pipelines. It could be ship dockyards, because China has 200 times more ship dock capability, or what are they called, shipyards, compared to the United States. So if you want to achieve mass destruction, you need to control the high ground, and that's the moon. So it's just physics, folks. This is high school physics. It's not even complicated. But very few people are willing to even consider this because they believe in fairy tales. So, like Trump is going to be the peace president, and all the bad people are going to be arrested and go to prison. Yeah, okay, whatever. It was all nonsense. Oh, we're gonna have human colonies on the moon. Oh, wait, on Mars, but now, no, it's the moon now. Yeah, it's all nonsense. It's just for gullible people, people who are easily fooled by low-level Jedi mind tricks, basically. So that's all this is. You're going to see it. Just watch. Just watch. How many things did I say 10 years ago that have been proven correct? Almost everything about the pandemics, about the vaccines, about glyphosate, about the rigged science journals, everything. Has been right about all of it. And I'm right about this too. This is all about weaponizing the moon, period. All right, so thanks for listening. You can catch my articles on this at naturalnews.com. And you can also follow more of my videos at brighteon.com. And I'm in the process of launching a new video site that will host my videos plus our new AI avatars. And that site is called brightvideos.com. But it's semi-functional. It's still in the experimental phase. I'm actually still vibe coding the thing. I did unleash Opus 4.6 on it, and it solved some problems. So that's awesome. But you can check out that site coming up as well, brightvideos.com. Again, not officially launched, but behind the scenes, it's okay to go there and poke around. Not everything will work, but most of it will. So anyway, and bottom line, when you look at the moon, understand what you're looking at. You're looking at the high ground weapons launch platform. That's the way the U.S. military looks at it. And remember, Elon, half of his company, half of his tech is all military. Okay, I mean, well, that doesn't make sense. Half of his tech is military. The other half, he's working on robots, which will also have military applications. So the reason Elon is allowed to continue to be who he is and to exist as this, as this role play is because he's a spokesperson essentially for the military industrial complex. And he weaves the stories that people believe so that they don't understand the weapons militarization and surveillance technology that's actually being rolled out and implemented right in front of them. That's Elon's role. He's the Pied Piper for military technology. And people follow him and they think he's, Tony Stark or something. No, he's the Pied Piper. He doesn't even believe in freedom of speech because people like me are still shadow banned all over X, and X won't even allow links to brighttown.com. Go figure. They're fully censored. So, he's a role player. He's cosplaying Tony Stark. He's not even a real person in essence. His persona is it's constructed, it's engineered for this very purpose. So once you understand that, everything else makes sense. But thank you for listening. Take care.
Stock up on the long-term storable Ranger Bucket Set. 536 servings of clean organic superfoods for your survival pantry. Certified organic and lab tested for purity. Order now at healthrangerstore.com.